Cougs and Beavs scheduling alliance with the Mountain West? It might be happening. Let's talk about it next.
Realignment and expansion is always in the news, and we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a special perspective on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
It's great to see you again here. We got a short video here regarding the Pac-12, but actually really regarding the Beavs and the Cougs of Oregon State and Washington State, and what I guess we'll continue to call the Pac-2 at this point.
Yeah.
Right after we did our last update just a couple days ago, the next morning, here's some new headlines of a potential scheduling alliance with the Mountain West, and it's kind of ironic. We didn't see that during that episode, but Steve, you actually alluded to that type of, and we were kind of talking about affiliate agreements or affiliate members and things like that, and very similar to what they're talking about here. So we'll keep this kind of short and sweet, but I think it's really interesting and something that we literally just were talking about. So news broke on Tuesday morning about a possible scheduling alliance with Oregon State and Washington State, and between those two and the Mountain West. So again, we talked in that episode about, how could scheduling work out?
Right.
That'd be somewhat difficult to do in a two-member conference. And you mentioned the affiliate agreements, and here's a potential. They're calling it an alliance, a scheduling alliance, but same type.
Affiliation alliance.
Same type of thing. Apparently, there's some different scenarios that are being passed around that could play out if the Beavs and the Cougs are a two-team conference for 1 or 2 years. So for 2024, 2025. Currently, the scheduling proposals are being circulated amongst the Mountain West presidents right now. And feedback from the presidents is expected fairly soon from the reporting. Supposedly, there's kind of several different models that are being floated around. One is that the Bees and the Cougs would play 8 Mountain West opponents. One is where they would play 7 Mountain West opponents. One is where games would count towards conference play or conference wins and losses. One, obviously, is that they wouldn't count towards conference wins and losses. And also, obviously, if that were to happen, certainly they need to figure out the scheduling, but there's got to be a compensation piece, obviously, to that as well. So this isn't, we're interested in the scheduling and who they're going to play and all that kind of stuff, but the bigger picture, obviously, there's always some sort of financial aspect to it, economic aspect to it, so that all has to get played out in that as well.
It's all about the Benjamins.
All about the Benjamins. I wish I had the song. We could play it right now. So, some questions arise. I think it's great. It goes down the path that you and I have been kind of alluding to here for a while. It potentially is the first step in what could be a merger. It's kind of, let's put our toe in the water here. Let's see how it works, while also allowing the Beavs and the Cougs to maintain a two-party Pac-2 conference and get the benefits of said conference for the next 2 years. So potentially I see this as a potential massive win-win for the Pac-2 and the Mountain West, and then also closing kind of that after the 2 years, 1 or 2 years, kind of closing that into what would be the new, one of our commenters said the new Big Mountain, or the new Pac West, or whatever we're going to call that. So, obviously some of the questions here are, what are the costs going to be? I talked about the compensation packages. Again, what are the future considerations to be given? Is it that the Mountain West says, we'll have an affiliate agreement here in the beginning as long as you become a long-term member come 2026. I don't know that. And then the other really big question, we're very focused on football here, obviously, but I know, Steve, you've often brought up, the other sports. How do the other sports, all the other Olympic sports, how does that come into play for these things? It's my understanding, I think this is probably primarily or only focused on football.
Probably, more revenue sports.
More revenue sports. So the Cougs and the Beavs still have to figure out, obviously, what they're doing with their other sports. But again, I think every day you're seeing some movement on this. I mean, it may not be reported to us that there's movement, but a lot going on there up in Washington State and Oregon State. So what are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, since our very first episode on this topic, we've talked about there's probably going to be some short-term solutions and some long-term solutions. So most of the things so far have been short-term. Oregon State and Washington State, they're worried about next year. They're worried about are the other members still voting members, how the revenue for this year going to be split up, all of those kind of things. But we said at some point they're going to have to start transitioning to long-term plans. I think this is the bridge to the long-term. It really looks like in the short term they're going to try and focus on being a 2-team conference. They've gotten that waiver or promise of a waiver from the NCAA. They can do that for up to 2 years. So that looks like that's pretty set in stone for their short term. This is a bridge, and honestly, it makes perfect sense. And no matter I think there was 3 different options that are kind of going around.
Several. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know if they specifically said the number, but several.
Yeah. So, and honestly, all of them I think make sense in their own right. First of all, the one option, which I think is more like affiliation or affiliate members, where those 2 teams, they would actually count as conference games. That's more of a tighter, intrusive bonding. Whereas the other options are more like what Notre Dame has with the ACC.
Correct, right.
More of just a scheduling agreement. And that kind of looks more like an alliance of what I would think as an alliance. So,
right.
But either way they go, I think it makes total sense. The Oregon State and Washington State, they have on one side, they've said they'd love to be in a power conference still, going forward.
Right.
But at the same time, they've talked, and you've mentioned this a few times, about regionality. They're probably going to have some revenue cuts. I mean, with everything that's blown up with the Pac-12, down to the Pac-10, down to the Pac-2 now, they're going to have some revenue cuts. It makes a lot of sense if they can participate in a high-level football conference in some way, whether it's as affiliates or just as a scheduling agreement. They can continue to do that, and those schools are in their region. Yes. They're not traveling across to Florida and West Virginia or North Carolina or wherever, Massachusetts, Connecticut, trying to come up with a schedule, playing against independent teams and all kinds of other places. This gives them that regionality. It gives them a temporary solution, a bridge, those 2 years, if they can make this work. And like you mentioned, it allows them to dip their toe in the water. How is this going to work out? This allows them kind of a test run, a trial phase, an engagement before the wedding.
Correct.
Where they can see, can we live together? Can we go shopping together?
Yeah.
Can we do this together? Before they really solidify those bonds. So I think it makes a ton of sense. For competition-wise, I think it would make some great games. Imagine this year if Air Force was playing Oregon State and Washington State,
right.
Resume builders for all of them. Some of those really good, solid teams in the Mountain West playing these 2 teams, I think would make for fantastic games, and it makes sense regionally. It makes sense all the way around. I think it will save them money, allow them to still operate as a conference,
right.
Lets them kind of build a bridge to their future, because that's once they get we have hearings coming up to figure out the short term,
right.
But they're going to have to start building that bridge to the future. So my thoughts are, it's a great idea. It just makes sense. That's why I mentioned it as a possibility in our last episode, not because I'm some genius or clairvoyant. It just makes sense.
Right.
From what both sides have said and what they've signaled, it just seemed like this was inevitable.
Right.
And it's a way, again, for them to bridge that gap. So those are my thoughts. What else you got, JY?
Well, I would just say 3 things. I think, one, it's clear. I mean, there were early reports that the Mountain West had reached out to these 2 schools, gave them a pitch, so to speak, of what that looked like. And I think it's clear now that this reporting's out here. It's a little quiet there for a while. Certainly Oregon State and Washington State had their focuses on some other things here with the hearing and things like that. But clearly that bridge, that connection has continued and maintained. This is only further showing that they still have unified interests, I think, to make this work, to your point. So even though it's been a little quiet on that front, I think this clearly shows that all things point that something like this is probably on the horizon. And, you mentioned teams. You look, I mean, they potentially could be playing 3 California teams, 3 good California teams, right? Yep. I mean, you got Fresno, San Diego State, maybe having a bit of a crap season right now, but historically they've been a solid team, and you're getting down into San Diego, that Southern Cal market.
Absolutely.
San Jose State is there, and you got some Colorado teams with Air Force, Colorado State, and of course Vegas,
Yeah.
you've got UNLV, of course, you've got Boise.
Yeah.
I mean, just a lot of really interesting markets for them to be in here.
Yes.
So, again, I think the partnership would be fantastic. And the last thing I just want to say is a reminder, you brought it up, the hearing is set for November 14th. I mean, that's less than 3 weeks away right now. It'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of settlement talk before that. Things have been really quiet here recently with that. You never know what that means, but we're gearing up for that hearing here in a couple of short weeks.
One thing I just remembered, I did notice in some of the reporting we saw that no matter which one of those plans that they entered into, they would still have the opportunity. Oregon State could still play Oregon. Washington State could still play Washington, which is important to those teams.
Sure.
It's important for them to be able to play each other. So it protects their rivalries and gives them some other opponents to play. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Win-win-win.
Absolutely.
So, hey, that's it. When we get this out there, that just had broke right after we did our last episode, and we certainly think this is newsworthy, especially for the Cougs and the Beavs fans. We like to stay on top of this stuff. So thanks for tuning in. As Steve said, we're expecting an SEC, Big Ten, ACC, maybe not SEC, but ACC and Big Ten update here in the next couple weeks. And we're certainly keeping our ear to the floor on this, seeing what else comes up. As soon as we know, you'll know. So we thank you for tuning in again on the Big Mountain.